Right, so I wanted to share a bit of the behind the scenes on how we build applications over at Mixpeek. So on the left-hand side here, we have Cursor, the Cursor IDE, and within Cursor, we have various modules. We have API, clients, configs, docs, etc. And we kind of have a very structured architecture and design pattern for how all of these modules work together. So this is a single monorepo, and the monorepo contains various requirements. So for example, engine is our Ray cluster and all of the Ray submission jobs and serve and all of that stuff. And then we have API, which is all of the fast API stuff. And so API cannot import engine and engine cannot import API. And that's important because there are dependencies in API that are much lighter weight than the dependencies in engine. And so for example, in engine, we have some libraries like transformers and sentence transformers. And so these are very heavy libraries, and it's important because these heavy libraries tend to be very RAM, CPU, GPU, memory, disk, etc. High requirement, and so we want to separate them, right? So we do so in poetry groups, and so engine has a poetry group, API has a poetry group, and then we have core, which is just shared across both of them, right? And so when we design our requirements, we basically ask Cursor to define a PRD. Right, and so this is how we start any kind of project. Let's see if we have an example PRD somewhere in here. PRD. So we leverage Cursor to kind of identify exactly what we want to accomplish. So in this case, we wanted to create the object batching and processing capability. And so we work with Cursor to kind of construct the PRD. And the PRD, because we're using Cursor and we are kind of doing a Q&A with the IDE and the code base to really construct a PRD that's representative of all of the requirements, and it fully understands everything that we're trying to accomplish with this particular feature. And so we keep the PRD in the particular module that it is working through. And in the PRD, we want everything to be self-documenting. We want everything to have unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and we want to verify the output. Right, and so unit tests, as you can imagine, are not as thorough. They're just kind of testing the actual functions that we're constructing. Integration tests are more combining these different functions together. And then end-to-end tests are a lot more sophisticated because they typically hit the actual APIs. Right, and so here we have the end-to-end test folder. We have stateless and stateful end-to-end tests, and that's important because it allows us to construct all the resources, test all of the resources, etc. And then what we can do, so we have a UI in which users can actually observe their Mixpeek account, their organization, down to the namespaces, the buckets. These are all the resources that we construct for the user when they are leveraging the service. And we have various health checks to ensure everything is functioning. So as you can, as we discussed, we have different resources. In this case, we have the API. So we have the API here is where really the health check is getting sent to. We've got Engine, S3, Mongo, ClickHouse, Celery, Quadrant, Redis, etc. And so these are a lot of services, the big kind of interoperability play between all of these services and communicating with the API and then ultimately the client. And so when we construct our PRD, we want to be mindful of all of these different design patterns that we've constructed in the code base. And so we have that all designed in the PRD. We want to make sure that we're using all of the same design patterns. And so we have this architecture document that has all of the design patterns. We have this resources document, which is actually quite large. It identifies all of the resources that we have available. Every module in API we ideally have a README file for it. That way the agents understand how the resources work at a very high level. All right, and so this is important because not only does it allow a human to kind of jump in and understand how everything works, but also as we create more PRDs for features, requirements, bugs, etc., we can kind of vibe code them away. And so, as you can see here, we are working through some features that we want to build out. And as we build out those features, we have what's called Watchdog. And what Watchdog is it allows our services, Ray, Engine, Celery API, etc., to restart as changes are actually created in our code base. And this is important because if our services aren't restarted, then the actual resources don't pick up on those changes. And so it gets very confusing for the IDE. And so Watchdog is, let's see, where's Watchdog? I think it's in the shared folder. And it's important to have a shared module in the monorepo so that shared can be imported by both engine and API. Similarly, we have clients. Clients have interfaces. Analytics is an interface. Caching is an interface. These are basically interfaces on top of the provider. So ClickHouse, Google, LLM Mongo, Quadrant, etc. And so if we look at, I believe here, we can probably look at API, the main file. There should be an configure async services here. So this is where we are effectively saying, hey, whenever there's a change in engine, API, shared clients, which are just modules in our monorepo, then do a Watchdog restart. And that's important because, again, it allows the resources to pick up, or the services to pick up on those changes. So this is good. We're making some progress on some of these capabilities. And then again, it's all reflective in the studio. And then finally, we have the local Ray dashboard to actually capture all of the job submissions and the serve endpoints that we have available. And we'll kind of dive into what Ray is later on, but this is important because this is the UI that Ray presents in order to manage all of the batch operations, the job submissions, serve operations, clustering, actors, etc. This is a very high-level TLDR on how we build functionality into Mixpeek. And so happy to dive into this at a deeper level whenever. Thanks.